Hi everyone, this is Ellen from the Astrology Journal. So I want to talk about the Aries full moon chart. We are having an Aries full moon on October 17th, 2024 at 7:26 Eastern Daylight Time. I am recording this on October 16th, about midday. There is a lot going on in the chart, but usually what I do is I kind of look at the chart in detail and use that to sort of guide what I say. But in this chart, I want to do it, in this video, I want to do it a little differently. I want to talk about an experience I've been having that I feel like has been reflective of the energies, especially of the eclipse we had on October 2nd, and also of this chart. It really started coming through for me, I don't know, maybe the end of last week, the beginning of this week, kind of it sort of started to make itself known. So first I'll just look, kind of give an overview of the chart. So we have the Aries full moon. Here's the chart with everything in it. There is a lot going on, as there has been with all of these charts we've been looking at in recent times. You can see here the sun is in Libra and the moon is in Aries. This is the Aries full moon signature, moon in Aries, and it's conjunct Chiron. So there's something to do with a wound here that may be coming forward to help us go a little deeper into who we are. So there are a number of patterns in this chart, and I want to just look at those briefly. So we have a grand cross. Here, it's a cardinal grand cross. It's cardinal because all the planets involved are in cardinal signs. So we have the moon conjunct Chiron in Aries. Aries is a cardinal sign. Mars in Cancer. Cancer is a cardinal sign. The sun in Libra. Libra is a cardinal sign. And Pluto in Capricorn, and Capricorn is a cardinal sign. So it's a grand cross because you can see here so all of these green lines are squares, and then in the middle there's this cross pattern. These two oppositions make a cross pattern. So that's the grand cross. Cardinality is about this idea of stopping and starting, or initiating something new, and then that process of initiating. If you think about trying to light a fire, you'll try a few times, and maybe it'll take a while before it catches, but then maybe it'll catch and it'll go out, and so you have to try again, and then maybe it'll catch, and you really have to pay attention to it. You have to focus on it. You really have to give it, tend it for it to be able to take hold. So it's this idea of stopping and starting, and the need to give attention to something to make sure that it gets going and needs to be tended and taken so it can take hold. That's what I'm trying to say. So the moon here is in Aries in conjunct Chiron. So the moon, we could say here, is this idea of nourishing the fire. Aries fire sign, nourishing the fire, nurturing the fire, tending the fire. And perhaps there has been a wound that has been preventing us from doing that. So that might be one way to look at this grand cross and cardinality. The other way you can think about cardinal is this idea of trying to start a car where you try to, I'm not sure how it works today, frankly, because I haven't driven a car in a long time. I have a license, I just don't have a car because I don't have a need for one. But back in the day when I did have a car and was driving, you used a key, and you would turn the key, and if like it was in the winter, it might take a while for the engine to catch, and then maybe it would catch for a minute and then it would stop, and so then you would have to start again. So it's that same idea of stopping or starting, trying to start something, and then it taking hold, but then maybe it doesn't catch, and so you just have to keep trying until eventually it really gains a toehold. So that's that idea of cardinality. And again, the idea of perhaps a wound having been preventing us from really tending the flame that does start, that does catch. Then here we have a kite pattern, and we've been having kite patterns. I think that's really interesting. This one points to Pluto in Capricorn, and remember, Pluto is part of this grand cross pattern. So this is the direction of the kite pattern. We could almost say that Pluto is the great attractor for this kite pattern. It's determining the direction that the kite will go, perhaps, something like that. And Mars is the steering wheel, and its destination is Pluto. I think that's super interesting. So Pluto is the soul, and Mars in evolutionary astrology, Pluto is the soul, and Mars enacts the desires of the soul. So the soul is the desires that we come in with, you could say, and Mars enacts those desires. So I think that's super interesting. So Mars is steering the kite in a way from behind, but it has Pluto, the soul, in its sights. And so it's steering us towards the soul. That's just my way of thinking about this kite pattern, which I think is kind of interesting. And then, it's notable that Venus is here on one of the, I'm not sure what you call this, one of the points of the kite, and then Neptune is on the other. Neptune is unconditional love, divine, source energy, etc. It can also be confusion, dreams, imagination. It can be illness, etc., etc. And we could say that Venus is the lower vibration of Neptune. And I like to think of it as, if Neptune is the divine and we are droplets of the divine, Venus is, the work of Venus is to bring that unconditional highest love into our incarnated experience in relationship with ourselves and in relationship with one another. And Venus is in Scorpio. Scorpio is ruled by Pluto. And so this idea that Venus is doing the work of the soul here also. Then we have this other pattern, which is not an officially recognized pattern, but this is a keen decile triangle. I kind of jokingly call it the crunch triangle. Keen deciles have a kind of a bad reputation. They're said to be about obsession and compulsion. There is a nickname called the fatal and the natal. I think that it's so if those to me are the negative expressions, right? So everything has a positive and a negative expression. So everything has an intention, and then the question is, are we able to enact that intention, or are we having to compensate in some way because we can't figure out how to enact that intention? Maybe, and in this case, this triangle is pointing to Chiron, which suggests there is some kind of wound to our ego identity, our sense of I am, that is preventing us from being able to, or has been preventing us from being able to do the constructive work of this keen decile energy. And so maybe some sort of wound is surfacing for us to see and is being healed, and that will allow us to do, I almost want to say surrender to the work that's actually here to do. The insight that I had about the keen decile was when I was looking at a chart, and there was a lot of Cancerian energy in the chart. And it struck me that one way to think about the keen decile is this idea of pressure. Like, that's what obsession and compulsion is. There's this idea of pressure. And if you think about the baby going through the birth canal squeezes in on that baby, and it brings a lot of pressure onto that baby. And the intention of that pressure is to prepare the baby to be able to enter into the new environment, because it wouldn't be able to survive so that pressure, for example, I guess squeezes out the water from the lungs, and that allows it to breathe in air when it gets into the new environment. So it's entering a whole new environment, and it needs that pressure to prepare it for this new environment. So that's kind of the positive way that I think about the keen decile. I'll just leave it there. There's another metaphor that I have, but I'll just leave it there, and I've talked about it in other videos. So now what I want to do is talk about the experience that I've been having, which has to do with a wound that I've been processing for years, that has affected me my whole life, and really came to a head some years back when I came across a teaching. And then I sort of found my own rational solution to the dilemma. But what has come up now is the realization that there was an emotional experience that I hadn't been processing, that the rational solution allowed me to bypass. And now I'm able to do that emotional work. So let me talk a little bit. I don't want to go into super detail, but I came across so let me start this way. I'll just start from the beginning. So I'm gay, and I was born in 1963. So I was growing up in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and then I went to college in the 1980s. Graduated high school in 1982, and then I'm gay, and as far as I can tell, I was gay from the time I was born. And when I was growing up, that was a time when the gay rights movement was really taking hold. And the leaders of the gay rights movement were really trying to make space for themselves in the world. And there was a really intense conflict, battle going on, ideological battle, I suppose you could say, going on. And the other side of that battle, one of the figureheads of the other side of that battle, was Anita Bryant. And Anita Bryant, I grew up watching, the orange juice commercials. I can't remember what the name of the brand was. But the gays, the messaging that I heard about gays, I was raised in a Catholic religious environment. The messaging that I heard around gays, and nobody said it that I was these things. I didn't really know who I was. I would say I was, internally, I was conflicted because the messaging was that gays are abominations, and gays are child molesters, and gays are pedophiles and perverted. Gays were really the worst of the worst. And so as I've healed, I sort of have realized that I was sort of going through an inner conflict around this about, well, part of me knew I was this thing, but I couldn't be this thing because that meant I would be an abomination and a pedophile and the worst of the worst. And I didn't want to be that. I couldn't be that. I couldn't accept that I was that. So I must not be that, but I couldn't be this other thing. So I think it was a really challenging dilemma. And so I was what they call a closeted gay person. Because I couldn't resolve that conflict within myself. And I finally did, towards the end of college. But I was extremely sensitive. I think that experience, I have two things to say about this. I think that experience made me extremely sensitive to the whole idea of evil. On the one hand. On the other hand, from what I think is a deeper spiritual understanding that makes sense to me, so this is my personal way of understanding it. I'm not here to say this is the truth this is any kind of absolute truth. I'm saying this helps me make sense of it. I think that I came in with this dilemma unresolved. And so this was the lifetime that I created, or that was manifested for me, so that I could move through this dilemma and hopefully finally resolve it. So then, fast forward several decades, and I was really sick, and I came across a teaching that, within the context of learning something that I really value, and the teaching, I don't want to say what the teaching was specifically, because for me it was traumatizing. I don't want to say that the teaching is traumatizing in and of itself. I think it just depends on your particular, what's true for you. So for me it was traumatizing, and I can imagine it might be traumatizing for others. So I don't want to say what it was directly, and also it's not mine to transmit, because it's actually not something that that makes sense to me and that I would want to put forth in the world. But I'm not here to say that I'm right and someone else is wrong. I'm here to just say that it's not the way that I'm able to make sense of things. So the teaching essentially is about, in very general terms, the idea that we have choices, and some people will make choices for evil, and some people, when confronted with the same choices, won't make choices for evil. And this is a choice that we make. So I found this teaching extremely distressing. It went deeper and harder than what I just expressed. And it really, what it did, how I've come to understand it, was what it did was it brought this internal crisis to a head. And it became almost downright debilitating. And I had to process it for a few years. And I came to, it helped me to come to a place where I understood that I'm not evil because I'm gay. And by the way, this is just an aside. When I've talked about this with people, almost universally the responses would be, well, gays are men, you're not a man. And I think that kind of misses the boat. First of all, gay was back when I was growing up, gay was just a universal term. And second of all, it leaves a lot to be desired, because it's sort of almost saying, well, it's okay that gay men were called that. Or it's saying, why would you be confused? Because you're not gay, you're a lesbian. And so it sort of dismisses the experience that I had. So I know people are well-meaning with that, but I just want to put that out there. And these things are really hard. It's not like any of us have experience with knowing how to be present with these things, and we're not all, it shouldn't be the expectation that everyone be present for whatever we have to process. But anyway, I just wanted to give that perspective. Where was I? So I think that this teaching brought this inner crisis to a head. And what I did was I found my personal rational solution, belief, that was different, that just allowed more space for the reality of trauma and how that impacts people, and how we're all sort of have different personality types and different sensitivities, and we all are faced with these traumas at different points in our developmental unfolding, and so we're each affected differently based on all of those factors. But the interesting thing is, in the recent weeks, I've come across some, conspiracy theories, and they're everywhere, and I think some of them are probably true and some of them aren't. But they're really disturbing, right? Like if the conspiracy theories are true, if even one of them is true, they're very disturbing, and we know some of them are true. Based historically, we know some of them are true, and they're incredibly disturbing. I don't know about these conspiracy theories that I'm coming across. I don't know if they're true or not. I'm open to whatever the truth actually is. But I don't have the answer. But I did have to deal with the emotional reality of thinking about those possibilities. And I realized that in the past, I wasn't dealing with the emotional realities. I was just desperately trying to construct a narrative that allowed me to have some kind of peace, to have some kind of belief system that made sense to me, that was congruent within me. And I think that was an important step, but it allowed me to not, I guess on the one hand, it allowed me to not process the feelings, but on the other hand, I think it was, I didn't have the skill set to be able to process the emotions, so I relied on the skill set I did have, which was cognition, right? That's what I was trained in through school and through college. So when I realized that, I thought, oh, well, perhaps the answer to all of these dilemmas are in the emotional processing. Perhaps the way to get to the truth is through processing the actual emotions that come up around these ideas. And perhaps each of us will come actually to a different truth. But I think the important thing is that we come to our own inner peace. And I think the only way we can truly get to inner peace is through processing the emotions. So here we have Venus as part of this kite pattern in Scorpio. And Venus is about feeling. And Scorpio is an emotional, a water sign. So it's about emotion. And Venus rules both Taurus and it rules Libra. So Taurus is about feeling. Scorpio is about deep emotion, and Libra is about objective intellectual discernment and judging. And so this can be a default that helps us get to some semblance of balance, bring us back to some semblance of balance. But I would argue the real skill is learning to feel our emotions, that to get to true balance, to true inner peace. The rational would maybe bring us to objective peace, but to get to true inner peace, perhaps we need that emotional. We need to develop the skill of emotional processing. And interestingly, if we look at this keen decile triangle, one of the points here has Mercury on it. Mercury rules Virgo, which is this idea of skill development. And then Libra comes before Scorpio, so it's this idea of discernment. So we need skill and we need discernment to know what we're going to make a deep emotional commitment to when we get into Scorpio. But then we also need to be able to process those emotions. When you go to that deeper level, you have to already have the ability the skill to be able to process emotions, when you get here, and also to be able to make judgment, discernment about this or that. What I was sort of realizing, so if we have Libra, the sun in Libra, and we had that solar eclipse in Libra a couple of weeks ago, this idea of balance and judgment and discernment, and the idea of polarities, perhaps we can also think that way. I feel like what I was doing, so if the issue is evil in the center, then what I was doing was sort of creating a structure that allowed me to not have to face the feelings, or to look at it generously. I was finding my solution to that dilemma at the level that I was able to do it. I didn't have the skill to process the emotions or the awareness to know that I had to process the emotions. I had deep feelings, like even terror came up for me, but I didn't have the awareness that, or maybe the emotions were too overwhelming to be able to process, and so my rational mind kicked in to be able to do this. But anyway, but I feel like that was one side of it. But that was one side where I wasn't. The upshot was that I wasn't processing the emotions. And then the other side is this teaching about, some people just make this choice. And in my experience, what happened with that teaching, which isn't to say that this is what has to happen, but there was a lot of othering that went on. And I feel like that othering is the other side of the coin. So if evil is in the middle, then othering would be another way of bypassing the emotion, or not really being able to do the emotion. And I think on both sides, perhaps there's a question of, have we actually learned the skills of how to process emotions, or have we figured out other solutions because we've had to, because maybe we haven't had that process or that skill. I'm hesitant. I'm not sure I want to share this. But anyway, this is what's come up for me. And I guess what I want to say is that I feel like I finally found my peace with this question of evil. And I don't think, and I think the answer for me, I guess what I can say is the answer for me has been in the emotional processing. And I guess the reason I felt hesitant when I said I felt hesitant about sharing this is my experience with emotional processing is that if you've trained suppression, or you, at the very least, you haven't been helped with processing your emotions as you were growing up, emotions, you have to take it really slowly. You have to, just like with exercise, you have to build it up really slowly. You have to do a little bit at a time until you build up the ability and the skill to be able to process emotions. I mean, to me, emotions are no joke, and it's really important to process them. But literally, when I first started processing my emotions, there were times where I literally felt I was going to die if I processed this emotion. And I had to do it just a little bit at a time. So that's the one thing I think is really important to convey also in this. I think there is a deep ask in these charts to tend our emotional reality. But we have to do it where we are. We have to recognize, if we've been, for me, for example, I've been lying down for years because of chronic fatigue. I can't just go up and start running, go out and sign up for a marathon and run a marathon, right? I have to start way, way, way before that. I have to start even way, way, way before running, and I'm even starting before walking. So you have to start where you are, and that's true on all levels, including the emotional level. So I feel better having included that. I think that's super important. But I hope this made sense. That I think that we're in this time where we're coming across all of these sort of polarity views. And I don't know that the answer there, the intellectual answer can be a helpful answer, but I think ultimately what we have to do is learn how to process emotions and find the emotional answer. Because I think that's where true inner peace comes. Libra, inner peace. I think that's where true inner peace comes. And I think that true inner peace then opens up the space to be able to enact love in the world and to incarnate love in the world. So this is Ellen again. There's one more quick thing that I wanted to say, and it's this idea of responsibility. And so in the chart, Capricorn is responsibility, and opposite of Capricorn is Cancer. So one way to read this is this idea of taking responsibility for our emotional reality, Capricorn reality, Cancer emotional reality. And we could say learning to nurture and nourish ourselves emotionally, learning how to process our own emotions. When we're kids, we don't know how to do this, and we need help and support to be able to do that. And so one of the things, so this is the kite pattern, we have Pluto and Capricorn opposed Mars and Cancer. So the Cancer-Capricorn polarity is relevant here. And then we have this crossbow here on the kite, and that's connecting Neptune and Venus. And so the idea of relationships and the need really for support, emotional support in our relationships. But there's also the possibility that we may experience grief, because if we didn't have that experience of help when we were younger to figure out who we are and to figure out how to process our emotions so that we could come to that determination, we may experience grief, at that reality, and at the fact that we have to take responsibility and didn't have help doing what we needed to do. And so that may be part of the landscape for some of us. I know that's part of what comes up for me. But the blessing really is that we learn how to do this. And maybe, whether this lifetime or another lifetime or, whatever if it happens to be our role, maybe then we can be a support for other people. Young children or even adults as they go through this process. Of course, the challenging part around this is, is codependency, that Libra archetype of potential for codependency. And that happens when we aren't able to take responsibility for our emotional reality. But it also happens if we become so harsh about that idea of responsibility that, that because we didn't have support and we had to figure it out for ourselves, that we think, well, that's just the way it is. But perhaps it's not just the way it is. Perhaps there is some kind of balance point where, yes, we're responsible for our own emotional reality, but perhaps there's some place there for being able to support and help one another also. But we each have to make that determination for ourselves about what's true for us. So, that just came up for me, because I feel like part of my path in this life, a big part of it has been, learning to take responsibility for my own emotional reality. So thank you for listening. I hope that I was able to offer an insightful perspective based on my experiences. I always appreciate your likes and comments and subscribe. So if you feel so moved, feel free to do any of those. And with that, I will say goodbye for now, and I'll be back later. Okay, take care.